Rain fell like shards of glass over the battlefield. The sky was black, lit only by the burning wreckage of ships. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, pain spreading through every part of his body. His suit was torn, his helmet cracked, and the air was thick with smoke. He tried to stand, but his leg refused to move. Around him lay the remains of a battle no one had won. Humans and aliens both, scattered, broken, silent. He reached for his communicator, but it only crackled. No signal, no voice, no command. He was completely alone, stranded on an alien world. The storm howled like a living creature, carrying distant echoes of war. He dragged himself toward a broken wall, trying to find cover. His breath came heavy, and his vision blurred. When he closed his eyes for a moment, he thought he saw movement. A shadow, tall and silent, appeared through the smoke. For a second, he thought it was another human. But then lightning flashed, and he saw her. An alien woman with glowing violet skin and long silver hair that shimmered in the rain. Her eyes were golden, not cold, but sharp and alert. She held a weapon, shaped like a crystal spear, glowing faintly in her hand. Ethan froze, unable to even lift his own gun. He expected her to attack, to finish what the battle had started. But instead, she stared at him quietly, her expression unreadable. The alien woman stepped closer, her boots crunching against wet metal. She lowered her weapon and knelt beside him. Without a word, she touched his wounded leg. Her hand glowed faint blue, and warmth spread through his body. Ethan wanted to speak, to ask her name, but the pain pulled him back into darkness. The last thing he saw before blacking out was her face, calm and strange in the flicker of the fire. When he woke again, it was still night. The rain had softened to mist, and he was lying near a small fire inside a ruined building. The alien woman sat a few steps away, staring into the flames. Her weapon rested beside her, but she seemed peaceful. Ethan tried to move, and she turned, her golden eyes meeting his. She said something in her language, soft and rhythmic. He didn't understand, but the tone carried meaning. It wasn't a threat, it was reassurance. She offered him a small container of food. Something warm, strange in color, but smelling like real soup. Ethan hesitated, then nodded and took it. She watched him carefully, studying his reaction. When he finished, she gave a small nod, almost like approval. Then she wrapped her cloak tighter and leaned back against the wall. The wind outside howled again, but inside, the firelight made everything feel slower, quieter. Hours passed in silence, only the soft crackle of fire breaking the air. Ethan looked at her again, wondering who she was. Her face had scars, but her eyes were calm, ancient somehow. He wondered why she had saved him. Humans and her kind were enemies, sworn to destroy each other. Maybe she pitied him, or maybe she was tired of war. He didn't know, and she didn't explain. As the night deepened, Ethan began to drift in and out of sleep. Once, he woke to find her sitting closer, watching him. She was humming softly, a low, strange tune that echoed like wind through metal. When she noticed he was awake, she looked away quickly, as if embarrassed. He smiled weakly and said, "Thank you." She didn't answer, but her expression softened. She pointed to herself and said one word, "Lyra." Then she pointed to him, waiting. "Ethan," he replied. She repeated it quietly, testing the sound. "Ethan." Her accent made it sound almost like music. He felt warmth spread in his chest, something strange and unfamiliar in a place like this. She looked away again, pulling her cloak tighter. He could see her shoulders trembling slightly from the cold. Without thinking, he slid a piece of metal closer to the fire to make more warmth. She noticed and gave a small nod of thanks. For a moment, their eyes met again. Neither spoke, but something had already changed. They were no longer enemies. Not here, not tonight. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. The firelight flickered across the walls. Ethan lay back, watching the flames dance. Lyra stayed beside him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. He felt safe for the first time in days. As sleep claimed him once more, he heard her whisper in her strange language. He didn't understand the words, but the tone felt gentle, like a promise. And before the darkness took him, he thought he heard her voice again, softer this time. "Stay alive, human." Morning came with pale sunlight shining through the broken roof. The fire had died, and the air smelled of wet dust and smoke. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, feeling the pain return in his leg. For a moment he forgot where he was, until he saw her. Lyra sat near the fire pit, turning something in her hands. It was his broken communicator, its circuits still sparking faintly. She was trying to fix it, her long silver hair falling over her shoulder. When she noticed he was awake, she didn't speak. She only pointed to the food she had placed beside him. Ethan tried to sit up, his muscles sore. Lyra moved closer, steadying him with one strong hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, her touch careful. He murmured a quiet, "Thanks," and she nodded slightly. Then she handed him a small metal bowl filled with thick blue soup. It smelled strange, but tasted good. She watched his face while he ate, her golden eyes calm but searching. When he smiled faintly, she gave a quiet breath that almost sounded like relief. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the ruined world felt still. He noticed marks on the wall behind her, symbols etched deep into the metal. Maybe her people's language, maybe a prayer. She caught his gaze and spoke one word, tapping her chest. "Home," she said. Her voice was soft but filled with sadness. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding more than her words could say. Her home was gone, burned in the same war that had stranded him here. When he looked at her again, she met his eyes. "Human," she said slowly, pointing at him. He nodded. "Yes, human." She repeated it, shaping the word carefully with her lips. Then she smiled. A small, uncertain smile, the first he had seen from her. It made her look younger, almost gentle. Ethan felt something stir inside him, a strange warmth he couldn't explain. Later that day, she walked to the edge of the ruins, scanning the horizon. Ethan followed her slowly, limping, using a metal rod for balance. The sky was clearing, revealing 3 moons hanging above the wreckage. She pointed toward a distant ridge where smoke rose faintly. "Machines," she said in a low voice. He understood. Enemy drones, still searching for survivors. They needed to move soon. But his leg was weak, and they had no transport. Lyra turned to him and said something he couldn't understand. Then she touched his chest lightly and repeated a single word. "Trust." Her eyes glowed softly, and he nodded without hesitation. That night, they moved through the ruins together. The stars above were cold and bright. Lyra led him through tunnels and collapsed corridors. Every sound made Ethan's heart race. Once, they heard engines in the distance. She pushed him behind a broken wall and crouched beside him. Her hand covered his mouth gently as lights passed overhead. He could hear her breathing close to his ear, steady and calm. The moment stretched forever until the lights faded away. When it was safe again, she pulled her hand back slowly. Their eyes met in the dark. Neither spoke, but something wordless passed between them. He realized she had saved him again, without question, without reason. As they walked on, he finally asked, "Why are you helping me?" She stopped, turned, and looked at him. Her voice was low, her accent soft. "Because," she said after a pause, "you are alive." He didn't understand completely, but those words stayed with him. By the time they reached a new shelter, the sky was glowing red with sunset. They found a small chamber beneath the remains of a tower. Lyra started a new fire and set out her tools again. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her in silence. She cooked something using small glowing crystals that heated the air. When she handed him food again, he smiled. "You don't have to." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "I want to." For the first time, Ethan laughed quietly. A real laugh, rusty but honest. She blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly again. The sound of his laughter seemed to relax her. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Inside, the soft glow of the fire painted her violet skin in warm light. She looked beautiful in that moment, unreal and alive. Ethan didn't say anything, but his heart was no longer heavy. Something had changed between them, fragile but real. When he finally lay down to rest, Lyra sat near the doorway, keeping watch. He watched her silhouette against the dim light. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening to the wind. Before he drifted into sleep, he whispered softly, "Good night, Lyra." She didn't answer, but he thought he saw her lips move. Maybe she whispered it back, maybe not. Either way, he slept peacefully for the first time since the war began. Days passed slowly under the broken sky. The war felt far away, but but its scars still surrounded them. Ethan and Lyra built a fragile rhythm between silence and survival. She would hunt for food while he repaired what little tech he had left. They spoke in fragments of mixed words, gestures, and small smiles. Every day, the gap between them grew smaller and the trust stronger. One evening, Ethan sat by the fire, shaping a metal rod into a spear. Lyra returned carrying strange fruits and glowing roots from the forest. Her hair was wet, her armor scratched, but her eyes still shone bright. He looked up and smiled faintly. "You always come back." She tilted her head, not understanding every word, but sensing his meaning. "I must," she said softly. "You need me." The words hit him deeper than she knew. He wanted to answer, but the moment passed quietly between them. Later, they sat together eating, sharing the strange fruit she had found. Ethan tried to teach her a human word, friend. She repeated it slowly, friend, and laughed, the sound soft and musical. He laughed too, surprised by how human she seemed when she smiled. After a long pause, she whispered a word from her own tongue and touched his chest. He didn't understand, but the way she said it made his heart tighten. He guessed it meant something close to the same, maybe even more. That night, the world around them was silent except for the fire. Ethan told her about his home, his family, the green fields of earth. Lyra listened carefully, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the flames. When he mentioned his sister, she frowned and asked softly, "Alive?" He hesitated, then shook his head. Lyra reached forward, touching his hand gently. Her skin was cool, and her touch steady. "No more pain," she said slowly, trying to comfort him. For a moment, it worked. The war and its weight felt lighter beside her. But peace never lasted long. That same night, strange sounds echoed through the ruins. Ethan woke instantly, hand on his blaster. Lyra motioned for silence and crept toward the entrance. Her movements were fluid and quiet like wind through water. Through the cracks in the wall, they saw flickering red lights moving closer. Drones, human patrol units, scanning the debris. Ethan's heart pounded. They would detect his biosignature in seconds. Lyra turned to him and whispered urgently, "Hide." Before he could argue, she stepped out into the open. Through the smoke and flickering light, Ethan saw her lift her weapon. The drones turned toward her, targeting instantly. She moved like lightning, striking one, dodging the next. Energy blasts lit the night as she fought with fire and fury. Ethan wanted to help, but his legs still burned with pain. He crawled forward, trying to reach his weapon. When the last drone exploded, the silence returned suddenly. He found her standing there, breathing hard, blood on her shoulder. Without thinking, he ran to her, catching her before she fell. Her blood shimmered faintly blue under the moonlight. Ethan pressed his hand against the wound. "You're hurt." She shook her head weakly. "Not bad." But her voice trembled, and she looked pale. He lifted her gently and carried her back inside. For the next hour, he worked in silence, wrapping her wound with torn cloth. She didn't protest, just watched him quietly. When he finished, she smiled faintly. "You worry too much, human." He smiled back. "Someone has to." When she finally fell asleep, Ethan sat beside her, unable to rest. He looked at her face, calm even in pain. Every scar on her skin told a story he wanted to know. He realized how far they had come from being enemies. She had risked her life for him again, without hesitation, and he knew then that this bond was no longer just survival. Something deeper had formed in the quiet between danger and warmth. Before dawn, Lyra stirred and opened her eyes. Ethan was still beside her, half asleep, his head resting on his arm. She studied him silently, her gaze soft and full of unspoken emotion. She whispered in her language, words he couldn't hear, but the last one sounded like his name. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his face. Then she turned her eyes toward the sky beyond the broken roof. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. Maybe, just maybe, peace could exist, even between a human and her kind. The next morning came quiet and pale. The rain had stopped, leaving a silver mist hanging over the ruins. Ethan's wound was healing, and Lyra's shoulder was wrapped in clean cloth. They had both survived another night, but something between them had changed. It wasn't just trust anymore. It was something deeper, something neither of them dared to name. They left the broken shelter behind, walking through the remains of cities long forgotten. Crumbling towers reached toward the clouds like the bones of giants. Everywhere they went, silence followed. Lyra moved ahead, alert and graceful, her spear shining faintly with every step. Ethan followed, limping less now, his blaster ready but his thoughts far away. He couldn't stop watching her, the way she looked at the horizon, the way the light caught her hair. She didn't seem like the enemy he had been trained to hate. She seemed like someone carrying the whole galaxy's sorrow in her eyes. By evening, they found a ridge overlooking a valley filled with glowing blue trees. The forest below shimmered like stars had fallen to the ground. Lyra stopped, breathing in deeply. "This was my home," she whispered softly, her voice almost breaking. Ethan turned to her, surprised. "Here." She nodded, pointing to the valley. "Before the war," she said slowly, "my people lived there, my family." Her voice trembled on the last word. He looked out over the valley and saw faint outlines of structures, long abandoned. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Lyra gave a weak smile. It was. As the twin moons rose, they made camp near the ridge. The firelight reflected on her violet skin, turning her eyes into molten gold. For the first time, she seemed distant, lost in memory. Ethan watched her carefully, then asked softly, "What happened to them?" She stayed silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. "Humans came," she said, her voice cold and fragile at once. "They wanted our crystals, the energy in our soil. They said it was only business." Her eyes darkened. "They took everything." Ethan lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. He didn't need her to say more. He had fought in those same campaigns, never questioning the reasons. Now the shame felt heavy in his chest. Lyra looked at him, her eyes not angry but tired. "You were not there," she said quietly. "You are not them." He looked up, surprised by her forgiveness. "Still," he whispered, "I wear their uniform." She shook her head. "Uniform does not hold your heart." Her words hit deep, echoing in his mind long after she turned away. Later that night, they sat side by side beneath the twin moons. Lyra stared at the stars while Ethan tried to understand her silence. Finally, she asked, "Do humans have stories of stars?" He smiled faintly. "We tell them to children, to give them hope." She nodded. "My people believe the stars remember every life, even those lost." Her eyes glowed softly as she added, "When I die, I hope they remember me kindly." Ethan turned toward her. "They will," he said firmly. She looked at him, a little surprised by his tone. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something gentle, something human. The fire crackled, and a soft wind passed between them. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pendant. A piece of metal with faded writing, the last thing his sister had given him before the war. He placed it in her hand. "For you," he said. Lyra looked down at it, confused. "Why?" "Because you saved me," he said quietly, more than once. She traced the edges of the pendant with her fingers. Then she closed her hand and nodded, her eyes soft with emotion. "Thank you, human," she whispered. "I will keep it safe." They sat there in silence for a long time, watching the stars. Neither wanted to sleep, afraid the fragile peace might vanish by morning. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her voice low. "When I first saw you, I thought I should kill you." Ethan smiled faintly. "And now?" She turned her head, her golden eyes meeting his. "Now," she said softly, "I don't know who would save who." He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "Maybe both." A rare smile touched her lips, and the tension between them faded into quiet warmth. As the night deepened, the two of them sat side by side. Above them, the stars shimmered like silent witnesses to their unspoken bond. Lyra leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, just for a moment. Ethan didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply let her stay. For the first time in his life, the universe didn't feel cold. It felt alive, full of something worth protecting. Somewhere between war and peace, between alien and human, a fragile love began to bloom under the stars. The morning light spilled across the ridge, golden and calm. For a brief moment, Ethan believed they were safe. Lyra was still asleep beside the fading fire, her head resting on her arm. He sat quietly, watching her breathe, wondering how someone born on the opposite side of war could now mean so much to him. But peace in a broken galaxy never lasted long. A sound cut through the air, sharp and mechanical. Ethan froze, listening. A low hum grew louder, the unmistakable rhythm of human engines. He stood up fast, scanning the horizon. 3 drop ships broke through the clouds, descending like metal birds. His heart pounded. They were rescue units, his own people. For a second, he felt relief, then dread followed right after. If they found Lyra, they'd call her a threat, a target, an enemy. He turned to her, shaking her gently. Lyra, we have to go. She opened her eyes slowly, seeing his fear before hearing his words. Humans, she asked quietly. He nodded. They'll kill you. Without hesitation, she grabbed her spear and pack. Together they ran through the ruins, their boots hitting the cracked ground. The sound of engines grew closer, and dust rose in the distance. Ethan's communicator suddenly beeped to life, the rescue signal connecting. A familiar voice came through the static. Sergeant Ethan Cole, this is command. We've found your beacon. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the button. Lyra stopped and looked back, eyes narrowing. Your people. He swallowed hard. My orders are to return. Her voice broke slightly. And me? Ethan looked at her, pain written all over his face. They won't understand. Before he could say more, gunfire echoed through the ruins. Soldiers in heavy armor appeared at the edge of the valley, shouting commands. Lyra pulled him behind a wall as bullets tore through stone. She moved fast, her body like a blur, fighting back with her glowing spear. Ethan shouted, Stop! She's not the enemy. But no one listened. One soldier threw a flare, the explosion lighting up the sky. Lyra's shoulder burned where it hit her, and she stumbled. Ethan rushed forward, pulling her into cover. Her eyes met his, fear and sadness mixing together. They came for you, she whispered. Not me. He shook his head. No, they came for us. Through the smoke, his commander appeared. Ethan, the man shouted. Stand down, we'll handle the alien. Ethan stepped forward, gun in his hand, but pointed at no one. She's not a threat, he said firmly. She saved my life. The commander's eyes hardened. Then you've forgotten who you are. Ethan's jaw clenched, his heart pounding. Behind him, Lyra whispered. Go, human, I'll disappear. He turned to her, his voice shaking. I can't let you. The soldiers closed in, weapons raised. Ethan made a choice in that moment, a choice that would change everything. He turned his blaster on his own squad, not to kill, but to protect. Run, he shouted to Lyra. I'll hold them off. She froze, her eyes wide, unwilling to leave him. Then she ran toward him instead, grabbing his arm. No, she said fiercely. I stay. Together, they dove into a collapsed tunnel as explosions ripped the ground behind them. The shockwave threw them into darkness. Dust filled the air, choking and heavy. When the rumble faded, silence returned. Ethan coughed and looked around, his flashlight flickering. Lyra lay beside him, bruised but alive. He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. She turned to him, her voice soft. You fought your own kind for me. He nodded, breathing hard. You fought mine first. She smiled weakly through the pain. Then we are even. They sat together in the shadows, the sound of engines fading far above. Neither spoke for a long time, both lost in what had just happened. When Lyra finally broke the silence, her words came like a whisper. You should have gone with them. Ethan shook his head. And leave you? Never. She looked at him for a long time, her golden eyes shining even in the dark. You don't belong here, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I never belonged there either. The air between them was heavy, filled with smoke and truth. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing slowly. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks of the earth. Inside, 2 souls sat together, neither human nor alien anymore. Just 2 beings who had chosen each other against the universe. And though the stars were hidden by clouds, Ethan felt them. He knew they were watching. For the first time, he didn't care if he was found or forgotten. All that mattered was the woman beside him. The one who had fought, bled, and stayed. The abandoned orbital station floated silently above the ruined planet. Its metal hull groaned in the wind, and the lights flickered faintly. Ethan guided Lyra inside, her shoulders still bruised. She leaned on him, weak but determined, refusing to let him carry her completely. The interior was empty, dark, and cold, but it was safer than the surface. For the first time in days, They could breathe without looking over their shoulders. Lyra sat by a console, tapping strange alien symbols into a panel. Ethan watched, fascinated by the rhythm of her fingers. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. She looked up, golden eyes reflecting the pale lights. "Checking for threats, seeing if the outside is clear," she said softly. He nodded, impressed. "You always know what to do." She smiled faintly, but her eyes were serious. "I have to." He realized that for her, survival was instinct, but for him, it had become trust. They settled near a small chamber with broken seats and exposed wires. Ethan started cleaning his blaster, Lyra tending to the cuts on his arm. Her hands were careful and warm, and he watched every movement. The quiet between them felt different this time. Not tense or cautious, but intimate, fragile, and unspoken. He wanted to ask her about her past, her family, her world, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he just leaned back, letting her presence surround him. Night fell slowly inside the station, shadows dancing across the walls. Lyra finally spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I have never trusted a human like this," she said. Ethan looked at her, unsure how to respond. "I thought all your kind were the same," she continued. "But you—" She trailed off, golden eyes softening. He smiled faintly. "You mean I'm different?" She nodded, barely, and looked away. "You saved me without question." He swallowed, feeling warmth spread through his chest. "You're not just an alien warrior," he said carefully. "You're someone I need." Her gaze returned to him, searching, curious, hesitant. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the hum of the station surrounding them. Then the small shuttle in the corner sparked, lights blinking faintly. Ethan realized they could escape to a neutral colony if they repaired it. Lyra's eyes lit up faintly, hope shining through exhaustion. They worked together, fixing circuits, tightening wires, and testing the engines. Every touch, every shared glance deepened the bond forming between them. Hours passed, the cold metal beneath them offering no comfort. Yet, neither complained, both focused on survival and each other. As the shuttle hummed steadily, ready for launch, Ethan finally spoke. "Lyra, once we leave, the galaxy won't let us be safe." She turned, her expression serious but calm. "I know," she said softly, "but it will not matter. I stay with you." He felt the weight of her words, knowing it meant she risked everything. "Even if the universe hates it?" he asked quietly. She nodded. Even then, the stars outside reflected faintly through the broken panels. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. For the first time, the danger outside seemed distant. All that mattered was the fragile warmth between them. Hours later, they rested side by side in the shuttle's small cabin. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice soft. "You think humans would forgive you for helping me?" Ethan shook his head. "They would not understand." She smiled faintly. "Then we are alone." He nodded, but didn't let go of her hand. And that's enough. In that small, broken shuttle, two souls from different worlds shared one truth. They had chosen each other, defying war, fear, and the galaxy itself. Above them, distant stars shone cold and bright. But inside, warmth and hope burned quietly. For the first time, Ethan dared to dream of a future not as a soldier, but as someone who belonged, somewhere, with Lyra. The shuttle drifted silently above the ruined planet, its engines humming softly. Ethan sat beside Lyra, checking the controls, every sound outside making his heart race. The danger had not ended. The humans would search for him. The galaxy itself seemed determined to keep them apart. Yet inside the small cabin, a fragile peace existed, fragile but real. Suddenly, the sensors beeped urgently, red lights flashing across the dashboard. "They found us," Ethan whispered, tension tightening his chest. Lyra moved swiftly, grabbing her spear and scanning the hull. Outside, tiny silhouettes of enemy drones appeared, moving fast and precise. Ethan's pulse quickened. The memories of past battles surged in his mind. He turned to Lyra. "We have to move now." She nodded, eyes fierce, golden light shimmering in the dim cabin. Her voice low and calm. "I will not leave you." Ethan hesitated. "If we fight, one of us may die." Her hands clenched around his arm. "Then we fight together." The first drone burst through the shield, firing pulses of blue energy. Lyra struck first, her spear igniting with alien light, slicing through the attacking drone. Ethan fired carefully, hitting another, shielding her from debris. The cabin shook violently as more drones hit the shuttle. Alarms blared, red and orange flashing, sparks flying from broken panels. Lyra moved like lightning, protecting him and the ship. He realized in that moment that she had risked everything for him, not just once, but over and over, and now he would risk the galaxy for her in return. A blast tore through the hull near the cockpit. Ethan and Lyra were thrown to the floor, pain lancing through his arm. Lyra groaned but pushed herself up, golden eyes blazing with determination. "We cannot die now," she whispered, almost to herself. He reached for her hand, holding her tightly. "We will not." The shuttle shuddered again, twisting in space as the drones continued to attack. Outside, distant explosions lit the void, alien light reflecting off their faces. Their hands stayed locked, a silent promise in the chaos. Finally, Ethan managed to stabilize the controls. The engines roared, pushing the shuttle away from the planet's gravity. The drones followed, but the damaged hull made them hesitate. Lyra kept striking, fast, precise, protecting them both. The cabin was filled with sparks, smoke, and the hum of energy. Ethan's heart pounded. He had never fought for anyone like this before. It was no longer about duty or survival. It was about her, the woman who had slept beside him, cooked for him, fought for him. The woman who had risked her life and heart for a human soldier. When the last drone exploded far behind them, silence returned. The shuttle floated, shaking but intact. Ethan turned to Lyra, his chest heaving, eyes wet. "We made it." She looked at him, her golden eyes softening, fear and relief mingling. She reached up, brushing his hair from his forehead, trembling slightly. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I fought for you. I stayed for you. Just let me stay human." Ethan's hands cupped her face. "Stay," he said firmly, without hesitation. Tears shone in her eyes as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. For the first time in a galaxy torn apart by war, two beings from different worlds existed together, unafraid, unbroken. The stars outside shimmered cold and distant. But inside the cabin, warmth and light filled every shadow. They held each other, breathing, hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Ethan realized he would never be alone again. Lyra realized she had found someone who saw her not as a weapon, not as an alien enemy, but as a person. And in that moment, hope returned, fragile but alive. The universe could rage around them. The war could continue. But for now, they had each other. And that was enough. Together, they looked at the stars through the cracked viewport. Neither spoke, words unnecessary. Every danger survived, every battle fought, every fear faced led them to this. Lyra smiled softly, golden eyes glimmering with trust and love. Ethan returned the smile, strength returning in his chest. "Always," he whispered. She leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "Always," she repeated. And in the quiet, floating among the ruins and the stars, two souls from two worlds finally found a home in each other.